Okay, thank you, Professor. As you see, the title of my presentation is Policy and Regulations on Restitution of Ethiopian Cultural Heritage. The presentation has 4 sections: introduction, about general concepts about restitution, illicit trafficking, especially in the case of Ethiopia, and restitution policies and regulations, which include also international conventions and treaties, and finally conclusion and recommendation. As you know, cultural heritage are a link between generations, and it's also used as a symbol of identity, especially for those who originate that cultural heritage. And the movement of cultural heritage is highly related with the movement of human being due to various reasons, natural or human. From all movements of cultural heritage, war and subsequent looting of different peoples, defeated people, has been common practice since ancient time. We can see the Greek civilization. The Romans took a lot of heritage from the Greeks, and from the Romans due to the Napoleon expansion, the French took a lot of heritage from the Romans. And this is also highly intensified during the colonial period. The history of restitution has a long history, but it gained momentum, especially in the last decades of the 20th century. Especially which related with the independence of colonial states. There are 2 views about restitution, pro and against. To cite some of the arguments of against restitution, they argue that artifacts are part of universal human history, and it disseminates knowledge, diversity, dialogue, cultural dialogue. So cultural identity is dynamic, they argue that. Encyclopedic museums like the British Museum, like French museums, and museums in America have a chance to visit by many people. And there is also an argument that cultural heritage are better chance of preservation in the Western countries. There are also pro-restitution argument. They argue that encyclopedic museums are rich in looted material during the colonial and wartime, and they are favoring the scholars of the Western society. And there's also argument that cultural heritage will not be protected outside the Western world is hypothetical. And the strong argument is that cultural heritage is best understood in the original history and cultural context, and they also argue that cultural heritage are a symbol of identity for the people who create them. So in general, this view is becoming strong nowadays, and some countries are successful to recover their illegally appropriated cultural heritage. Having said this as introduction, when we come to illicit trafficking, especially in the context of Ethiopia, as you know, Ethiopia has ancient civilization, which is rich also in cultural heritage due to ancient civilization and cultural diversity in the country. However, considerable number of our cultural heritage are found in the museums of different countries, and individuals also in the hands of individuals. And this illicit trafficking, the history goes far back to the ancient time, but it's intensified, especially in the 15th century due to missionaries, travelers, foreign troops, researchers contributed for the illegal export of Ethiopian cultural heritage due to various reasons and mechanisms, like they took like souvenirs and gifts, especially with the development of tourism in 1960s. Heritage dealers also contributed for the illegal export. Drought and famine also contribute to some extent for some individuals sold their heritage during famine and drought time, and related with scientific research, especially which began in 1906 with the German archaeological expedition. Since then, especially in 1930s, from different sites from Ethiopia, artifacts were exported to France. In 1940, also from Omo site and other sites, artifacts exported to Kenya. In 1940 and 50s, the German researchers also took some cultural heritage from southern Ethiopia. In 1970s, also micro mammals from Hadar site exported to America. Another massive export, illegal export, is due to military expansion. It's the two military expansions. That is in 1886, the British expedition, Napier expedition. At that time, they were helped by museum professionals also, and they looted especially the principal church of Theodros and around also Magdala area. And historical evidences shows that confirms that the looted collector were transported by 15 elephants and 200 mules. And most of the looted items are still missed because most of the items are in the hands of individual troops. The second related with military expansion is that with the Italian occupation period, particularly in June 1936, Graziani ordered the regional governors to collect and to ship Ethiopian treasures, manuscripts, royal memorials to Italy. And the second, similarly, Mussolini also ordered in 1937 to take the Aksum obelisk. One of the challenge is that we are not in a position to identify how many heritage we have in abroad because of different reasons, specifically due to lack of access to the collection of different museums. It's very difficult to identify how many heritage we have. But to give you some data collected, but not exhausted data, in certain countries, we have a lot in France, then in United Kingdom, in the government organizations like government museums and private museums, in Germany, Israel, Vatican, Italy, and so on. But it's not exhausted list. When we come to restitution policy and regulations, different countries use different methods, but specifically in Ethiopia, we use treaties, convention, and cultural policy and regulations. When we see treaties, there were treaties after the end of the First and the Second World War to return especially the materials we looted during the war period. In the case of Ethiopia, there are bilateral and multilateral agreements, especially with Italy after the end of the Second World War in 1947, and the bilateral agreement in 1956 also to return the materials from Ethiopia. And another instrument as a policy is that international conventions, especially the two conventions, that is the Hague Convention of 1954 for the protection of cultural properties in the event of armed conflict, and the second is that the 1970 Convention on the means of prohibiting and preventing illicit export and transfer of ownership of cultural heritage, which related with also with this convention, the last convention, the 1978 Intergovernmental Committee, which promotes especially return of cultural properties in the countries of origin. Ethiopia, the People's Federation approved the two conventions, that is the 1954 and the 1970 Convention, it's become part of our legal system. So we use some of the conventions, especially during the return of Aksum obelisk, as an instrument. When we come to the policy, the cultural policy, the 1997 cultural policy, it has 16 contents. One of the content in the cultural policy is that to make arrangement for return of all Ethiopian heritage which have been expatriated in various ways. And there are also general strategies within this convention. One of the strategy for the in regard to repatriation and restitution of heritage that are expatriated in various ways shall be returned through purchase, donation, and exchange. And diplomatic campaign shall be made in national, continental, and international level for the return of heritage pledged and expatriated in different historical events. And we have also different regulations. The first proclamation about cultural heritage is the 1966 proclamation, but this proclamation did say nothing about the repatriation. The second proclamation, which is the 1989 proclamation, it has one article in the proclamation about restitution of antiquity. It says that the minister shall incorporate with the appropriate organs, take all necessary measures for repatriation of Ethiopian antiquities held in other countries. And the 1990 proclamation of the Ethiopian National Archives and Library has one in the duties, there is one article which makes the efforts to be made, bring to countries the original or copy literary documents which were taken out of the country. The current proclamation of ARSSH that is concerning to heritage is 209-2000. One of the duty of ARSSH is that controlling illicit trafficking and looting of cultural heritage, take all necessary measures and devise ways for repatriation of cultural heritage which have been taken out illegally and held in foreign countries. So Article 26 also states like this: cultural heritage illegally held in other countries shall be repatriated, and the data on cultural heritage held in other countries shall be collected and publicized. These are the points in our regulation. Based on this cultural policy and regulations, activities on restitution, general activities on restitution in order to bring back looted heritage home, combined efforts have been exerted by the people as well as the government of Ethiopia. One of the activities is that ratification of the convention, that is the 1954 and the 1970 convention. Another is signing bilateral agreements, especially with Italy. There were also endeavors by Ethiopian embassies abroad and friends of Ethiopia reside in abroad for the return of this cultural heritage. There are also efforts by associations like Afromet and CAT. Afromet is Association for Return of Magdala, Ethiopia Treasury, and CAT is that Cultural Association of Tigray. And they have also made some progress, especially on the restitution of cultural heritage. So due to this effort, some heritage are restituted in Ethiopia. From Italy in 1972, the statue of the Lion of Judah, which was taken during the Italian period, returned and erected in front of the railway station now. This is also the throne of Empress Zewditu. This is the throne of Emperor Haile Selassie, the chair of Empress Zewditu, and the watch of Empress Zewditu and the silver plate of Emperor Menelik were returned from Italy in 1972. From Magdala, in 1965, Queen Elizabeth returned the especially royal cape and seal of Theodros for Emperor Haile Selassie, and 2 letters to Queen Victoria by Theodros, Emperor Theodros Psalter, Emperor Theodros necklace, and weapons of Emperor Theodosius. This one is taken by Captain Robert, and when he died, he gave this heritage to the National Museum of Kenya, and the National Museum of Kenya returned or give to the National Museum of Ethiopia. A photograph of Alemayehu Theodros, religious icons, and arcs also taken during the expedition period, returned from Scotland. Parcel of Emperor Mentewab, also purchased from England by the government of Ethiopia. 494 Aksumite coins, also bought from abroad, 40 gold and 60 silver, manuscripts, ceremonial robes, as you know, also Afro-Agaba returned from Belgium, and the Tigray Association tried to return 124 heritage, and the Afromet also the same thing. The process, I will not go through the process of the return of Aksum obelisk, but it takes a lot of diplomatic and public pressure to return the Aksum obelisk, especially in 1992. Petitions were signed, African diplomats were asked the return of the obelisk, but in 1994 officially the Prime Minister asked the return of the obelisk, and the Italian government agreed to return in 1997, and it returned in 2005 and re-erected in 2008. Due to the efforts of ARSSH, also some artifacts in relation with research also returned. Monkey fossils from Kenya, hominids from Omo collection from Berkeley University, hominid from France were restituted in 1980s, 90s, and 2011. And ARSSH was very active, especially up to the end of the coming to the Aksum obelisk, but after that, the restitution activity is very, very slow. Especially in the last 5 years, there is no any activity on the restitution, but in the second GTP, the ARSSH planned to return 100 artifacts or restitute 100 artifacts from abroad. When we come to the conclusion, considerable number of Ethiopian heritage are illicitly exported into various countries in various ways. Especially war looting is a major and massive means of illicit export from Ethiopia. The restitution demand has long history, which is restituted, especially some heritage, including the Aksum obelisk. However, the process is generally slow and not well organized.